Welcome to Motocross, and this is the live podcast MX Unfiltered, and I have my co-host, Coach Rob Beams. But Rob, real quick, we have to just... All right, good morning, Coach. How are you
Good
doing?
morning. I'm doing great, man. Congratulations. I understand you've got a little girl that's turning 4 today.
Yeah, wild. And then, as you know, I've got the other one that's minus 6 months, I guess,
There you go.
what we would consider it. Pretty wild. Got her a gigantic, not a four-wheeler, but just the plastic little Jeeps, and I took all the stickers off of it and put Sonic stuff on it because she's like a super Sonic fan, but she's a princess at the same time, so I had to have all that on there. And I'm gonna go out to my private track later today, and she's gonna tear it up, and so that'll be fun. But as far as this weekend, there's lots to talk about, and I guess what I'll start off with was the whole Jett Lawrence thing, because Jett Lawrence ended up crying, going 1-1. And so this to me is a lot of bent up just emotion from, I mean, honestly, he's got a lot of weight on his shoulders for, what is he, 21, 22?
Yeah.
Somebody
I'm
in the
not sure
chat.
exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Travis from Moto Aftermath will probably know, but yeah, I mean, is the maturity that he has shown, but he's gone through the refiner's fire at so many different levels, but this weekend was a big one.
Yeah, my buddy Michael there at 23 Media was able to get some of the pictures of it, and I thought it was interesting that he had this big fella as security. Like, that's a first, right?
I just didn't understand, and I'm not being sarcastic, and I'm not trying to stir up the stink pot. Why was he there?
That's honestly my consensus too. Is Jett scared for being injured from what's going on? Because, this whole video here, which as we've spoken off air about, just seems a little out of context and a low blow. I mean, obviously, whatever he said was something that you should never say. And especially with him being as sought out for as a athlete in motocross. And he did do a nice apology on the press conference, but I thought this was a low blow by Lucas. Hey, we're just going to take this video of him at 16 completely out of context, and boom, he's saying something inappropriate. Because to be honest, we've all said something inappropriate, but because of his social status, it's a big problem. And so to me, that is why we had security here, is because there's going to be one or two people that are going to act crazy and are going to do something potentially silly and just mess his racing up. But for him to have all this pressure and still perform says a lot about his character. However, you do say that, like, he did kind of create the issue that's going on with Lucas Mirtl. So it's not like he can play the, oh, poor me card, because a lot of this was created by him and his brother.
Yeah, 100%. The crazy part about it is when you talk about mental toughness, think about the idea that he had Tomac breathing down his throat and did not succumb to the pressure. He'd get right on his rear wheel, he'd inch it back out, get back on his rear wheel, inch it back out. That to me was the screaming takeaway from this weekend, because it's the first time, and somebody had commented that Eli is on public record saying he's never raced with Jett before. And the joke was, well, he just saw it, right? He's right on his rear wheel. Now he got a chance to see what it's like to race against Jett. The other thing to keep in mind, and again, I can't take credit for this, somebody DM'd me, it does go without, I think it has to be factored in that Jett's never lost at this venue, and Tomac's never really been a fan of the venue. So as the old saying goes, Johnny, we get 3-4 rounds in, that's when the dust will settle, and that's when we'll start to see who's going to kind of settle in there. Perfect example is Malcolm, right? Never did see, maybe you heard why or how he went down. to end up with, I think, a 27th or 28th place after 12th in the first moto or somewhere around that area. It's pretty staggering when you look at the results. You look at the top 10 and then you look at the bottom 10 out of all 42 guys. It's pretty crazy when you look at who's in there. Same thing with the 250s. So, yeah, I think showing that he could handle the heat from Tomac. Do I think, and I agree with some of the comments that are here in the chat room, it's the idea that Jett, I don't think we saw beast mode from Tomac because he doesn't like Paula, but I think we're going to see a summer like we did with Tomac and Sexton. What was that, 2, maybe even 3 years ago now?
All right, Coach. I have to ask this question. Okay, so Jett
Sure.
was over a second faster than everybody. He was 2 seconds a lap faster than Tomac, relatively pretty close.
Yeah.
If I'm rounding up a little bit. And yeah, okay, so Tomac doesn't like the track. He's coming off of an injury, but so is Jett. Was this a choreographed strategy by Jett to stay within his riding ability, not override the motorcycle, but let Tomac get close and let him think that he's actually hanging with you? And then if things get a little dicey, then you just drop the hammer and you have that extra second speed and you just crush the guy behind you. I'll let you go and then I'll give my opinion.
I think it's a brilliant question. I would say yes. I mean, Jett wants to test himself against the best. What's crazy is to think that he's got that second gear. That's the part that's amazing to me, because whenever you're looking at the best athletes in the world, you're looking for two things. One, raw speed, and number two, consistency. So when the idea that he goes and he throws a 1 or a 2 lap, a second and a half faster creates a gap. We all know there was that one part of the track that Tomac was obviously quicker. He'd bridge that gap back up. But then when you got into those last 3 to 4 laps, not only did Jett create a gap, but then he maintained it. So to answer your question directly, I think it was definitely part of Jett's strategy. Also, we have to take into consideration, we've said it a couple times already here today, he does like that track. So Johnny, you've had those tracks that for whatever reason you go to, you gel with it. No matter what, your bad days still better than most people's good days. And I think that's what we saw with Jett. It'll get a little bit more raw at Hangtown. And then I think it'll really start to level out when we go to Colorado, because not that Tomac's ever said Colorado is his favorite track, but we know he's done very well there, and it'll be his home track, which that energy's, always helps.
Here, they made this so much more difficult compared to what they used to be able to do. But here, let's see if they show the lap times for second motos here. His best lap time was 2:16, and Tomac's best lap time was a second slower, and then Plessinger was a 2:20.
Does it tell you when that 16 was thrown down?
So lap 3, and the same lap
Jett
for Tomac was lap 3 as well.
Okay.
And then the same lap for Aaron was lap 3 as well. And it was 4 seconds slower. Dude.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got a situation where Tomac and Jett are going to be like Sexton and Tomac were that summer, where they were sometimes a 30-second gap at the finish line.
Yeah, that is effing insane here. Well, honestly, I can't compare the lap times with Sexton, because he made such a beginner mistake. And unfortunately, I have to say it as it is. He more than likely ruined his chances of defending the championship with that minor bobble lap 1. Okay. I said it on my reaction show, and Coach, you're very much about injury prevention and mental fortitude. And for him to have things go from bad to worse to extremely bad, it was all because he wasn't thinking forward. And having that goggle incident, he should have just went into the pits, gone back to 10th, 12th place, finish 5th for Moto 1, come back swinging to potentially win Moto 2 or get a podium. But what's your total thought on why Sexton didn't? Why would somebody think that they can do a whole 35-minute moto with no goggles?
Yeah, I mean, literally, it's the $1 million question. What I was going to ask you, and I didn't get a chance to text you over the weekend with it, I've actually meant to reach out to Travis with Moto Aftermath as well. Again, I don't want to make an assumption, and I'm not a goggle rep. A goggle rep has got to be probably the second worst job, only second to a mechanic, because a rider can wreck 100 times, but the bike can't break. And as we saw this weekend, nothing can go wrong with the goggles, because then it's the goggles' fault, right? But are they not putting Vaseline inside there? Because this was on the opening lap. We're going outdoors. We know the chances of that dirt getting in there. Is there no prep? I mean, when you go to the amateur races, we've got Vaseline in there. We've got things that if we do get a little bit of dirt floating around there, you've got something that captures it. With you having a good relationship with the goggle guys, are they not prepping them like that?
No, they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Seeing
How
the
bad could it
goggle
have been,
reps.
though? How bad could it have been on second lap or first lap, whatever it was, first or second, that it was that bad that he took his goggles off? Like, how big was the particle floating around in the goggles that it couldn't
So
be caught?
what I have heard about Sexton is he's just very finicky. Like everything has
Mhm.
to be perfect. Okay. Almost like Barsha has to have the tightest pants, you know. If it's not the
Right.
tightest pants, he can't wear them. Um, and I get the reasons for the tight pants because you don't want the excess slack to slide back an inch or so. I know
Just
there's a
just
lot.
just move on. Just
Yeah,
move on.
there's a lot of a pun there. So Travis is saying maybe the lens broke. That that is crazy. So this is what's happened to me in the past. And these guys, what they don't show on TV is usually they do a sight lap, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so you do your pretend start, and you kind of see where the lines are, and then you line back up. Okay, so what I think is Sexton was roosted on the sight lap. He had dirt on his visor. Okay, and then he was going, I don't like the goggles I have. Like I want more tear offs or something. So he takes those off, goes to his goggle guy, gets new goggles, and as he's putting on the new goggles, some of the dirt from the helmet falls into the lens. Okay. And it was
Makes
probably just
sense.
minor, but it's probably floating up there and it was enough to bug him. And truthfully, he probably should have just taken that one to the eye,
Mhm.
take a little bit of dirt pile in the eye as it's floating around lap 1 or 2. And you're kind of squinting and then finally your eyes clear up, as opposed to just fucking taking the goggles completely off with those massive downhills. People don't understand, like, your front fender is still roosting you under hard braking. So you're
Mhm.
trying to squint under hard braking, and then when you're accelerating, you got the guy in front of you doing stuff. It was just a stupid thing for him to do, was to take off the goggles. Rule number one is honestly, I truthfully want to see, as far as I love what we did in Supercross with the red flags, because yeah, we had more red flags this year, but it was also just more to protect the riders, which I'm totally good for,
Mhm.
right? Because the riders are not going to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I think there should be a rule that you're not allowed to go a complete lap without goggles. Like I think it should just be in the rule book. If something happens and you need new goggles, you have wherever you are on the track, maybe that full lap to go get new goggles and pull over, because all it takes is one rock and you've ruined your career, you've ruined your life. And I think all of us have ridden a little bit without um oh, okay. Slayer is saying that a rock flew up and cracked the lens, and they said it on the podcast. Okay, so let's just backtrack a little bit of what I said with the whole dust and the rock crap. Okay, if this is true, then that just makes even more sense to go get a new set of goggles, because if a rock is going to crack the lens, what is the rock going to do to your actual eyes? Right? It's just a major safety thing. And
Here's the
so
challenge that you run into. There's no way for Chase to let the guys know that his lens has been cracked. This is where communication would be fantastic. We're not, and I know that you can get into the idea of regulating what gets transmitted on the radios, but there's no way that Jade Dungy would have known that Sexton's goggles got cracked. So if all of a sudden him being Sexton comes over and immediately goes into the pit area and he doesn't have a set of goggles ready, it'd be a double clusterfuck, right? This is where communication on certain areas, Jace with Gypsy Tales is very big on this, and I agree. Certain things for like safety reasons, this would be a key component, because then Chase can say, hey, look, So Johnny, to your point, he doesn't take doesn't take the goggles off any earlier than he has to, i.e. on pit row, mechanics area. Yes, we recognize that the lens is cracked, but at least you got something in between you and your raw eyeball for that next lap. Hey, I'm coming in, I need goggles. And it's like a GNCC pit stop. If you've ever seen a GNCC pit stop, they're getting fuel, new goggles, and water in 3 seconds. And yeah, it sucks because it was opening lap, but like you said, it's dangerous for everybody. And then you go back to the danger. You called it out on your reaction show. If you watch the slow motion, he goes in the air, he downshifts, he ends up going in between gears. And then I'm sorry, let me back up. What I was going to say is when he took his goggles off, he almost got his bars snapped right out of his hands. So that could have been fugly.
It was honestly impressive, him taking his goggles off in the air, because pulling a tear off is one thing, but then reaching back and doing this and actually getting him off.
But he landed with only one hand on the bars. The other hand was still on the goggles when he landed. So the fact that he didn't get those bars snapped out of his hands, that could have been incredibly, incredibly ugly. Then the idea that the next lap, unfortunately, he hits that in between gears, because if you watch his left foot, he just barely taps down. And then when he lands, it's immediate. There's no forward momentum, and he goes forward.
Coach, one of the viewers is saying that Nico says that I doubt he cracked the lens. Those lenses don't really crack. Yeah, I can agree, because like when I broke my nose, I got hit square in between with a rock. My lenses didn't crack, but it was hard enough to break my nose. And the next thing I noticed is that my whole face was really warm because I just was bleeding profusely. To add on to what you were saying, okay, like, yes, him pulling his goggles off was telling the pit crew, hey, it's pretty straightforward, a message, he needs goggles. Okay. But then it was his mistake by not going in the next lap. He was out there 3 laps. Okay.
Well, you saw Jade had the goggles on. They showed that. So it was like, to your point.
Yeah. He's like trying to message.
He's ready. Yeah.
And so, Jace with Gypsy, we've talked about this a bunch, and it's like, why not have radio communication allowed where it's only on a section where we know that riders aren't really needing to think a lot. Like just when they're cutting back across the start and then the 2 little sweeper, okay, you have a 5-second place on the track where radio communication is okay. And, riders could probably have communication on the entire time so that they could relay to the mechanic or the team, hey, I need new effing goggles, like this isn't going on. Or, hey, I need an update of how far behind I am, how much time am I losing? Something like that. And then once they cross the start, communication is on. Chase, come in for goggles next lap. You have to. And then it's off, or just something like that, I think could prevent a lot of stuff. And we know how mental moto is. And the whole argument is when you're doing whoops or whatever, you don't want somebody in your ear. Blah, 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 blah. But with F1, they don't have direct communication. They've got the track guy that is then relaying information to other people. So there's a safe way to do it. They need to just do it.
You think about it. We talk about how fast these 4-strokes are now, right? And you go to something like Formula One, you go to NASCAR. This is what I think so interesting is we say one thing, then we contradict ourselves over and over and over again. If we can communicate to the riders, like you say, let's say it's Jay Bone from AMA saying, rider down at the end of, at this track. I don't know how you would partition the track off. So everybody that's hearing it in their helmet realizes, hey, when you come around this corner over this jump, there's somebody on the backside on the right side of the track. I know some people would argue and say that the riders don't want that. I understand, but for the safety of, this is where we contradict ourselves. I'm going to use Supercross because it's a little bit of an easier illustration. We have lights on sections that say, hey, there's a rider down. Okay. Well, everything's happening so quickly that we've seen numerous times where the rider gets past the light before he can even see it and or a flagger, right? But if you got it in their ear, are we going to be able to eradicate all accidents? No. But no different than car racing. These guys are going 200 miles an hour and they're like, accident in turn 3 and they're in turn 1, at least before they get there in 2 seconds. They know, hey, and what I love about it, Johnny, is when you hear the radio, what do they say? go low on the apron, go low on, stay high, stay high. The accident's at the bottom. So the driver doesn't have to try to decipher it. The people that are sitting above the stadium are telling them, go high, go low, go wherever. You reduce your risk of injuries. In this case, Sexton needs goggles. Sexton wasn't sure. We weren't there. Sexton's not here to defend his side of the conversation, but maybe he thought he had to go 2 laps so that when he came around, they saw that he didn't have the goggles on. Then that 3rd lap, he was going to come in, and then he went down. Who knows? I mean, we could sit and spitball this all day long.
Yeah.
I don't, it's hard
but
to believe
Coach,
that he
that
would
was
stay
enough
out there.
for him to be
Mhm.
thinking about that rather than something that comes second nature as just
Mhm.
fucking downshifting the motorcycle.
Yep.
And so he makes a massive error that is actually really small, but it ends up putting him on his head, and he more than likely gets a concussion. Like,
Did you notice that? To your point, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're onto something really big. Did you notice the first video when they show Sexton coming in and Jade and the other guy walk up to the bike and Sexton points to his head? And then when they show the replay, do you notice how they clip that part out? As soon as Sexton rolls up, if you go back and you watch it live or go back and watch a replay.
Oh, you think that was intentional?
Oh, hell yes, it was intentional. Because if he shows up this next week to race, he's exempt from the concussion protocols.
I think it was more than that, because I think what a lot of people missed, and something that I was going to show on my video here, was that bike was fucked. As soon as he pulled in, the radiator was just spilling water. And so you can't have him go back out there. Like, what is he going to, the motor's going to seize, and then he's really going to hurt himself.
Right.
Like, it was over before it even started. I was surprised that he didn't even line up for Moto 2.
Why would you be surprised by that, considering he rung his bell so hard? There's no way in hell he could go out for a second moto. He himself, when he came off and Jade and the other guy walked up, he shook his head and pointed like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "No, my head. I rung my head." And I think that's why he didn't show up for the second moto. I mean,
I do agree. I think.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
But watching it, we've seen people hit their head harder.
But you see him drop his arm when he went off and he was shaking his left arm. I was wondering if he took a stinger to the arm and it was kind of like dead arm, because when he picked himself up, got to the side of the track, and then he rode to the mechanics area, he was shaking that left arm out. I think he may have taken a stinger there. I'm not saying he hurt his shoulder, but I wouldn't be surprised if his shoulder was injured, just like his head. And then if you look at it, the bike, to add insult to injury, first he hits his head on the ground, and then the bike comes and the frame lands right on the side of his helmet. If you watch that replay, it's pretty brutal.
Okay. And then some of the comments we have here saying that, like, okay, in F1, they've got 100 different buttons for fuel mixtures and all sorts of shit, right? So they've got a button for communication. And you mean to tell me that, like, guys that are doing 220 miles an hour that are like, and they have enough time to press a button and talk to their guys, that a supercross athlete couldn't do the same thing, squeezing the bike with his knees, even going through the whoops, couldn't be like, all right, hey, I need whatever, give me the time difference between the two. How much time am I losing? Just something. And every time they're in the air. So I agree. Maybe having a two-way communication where there is a button. These guys, you're tapping the rear brake, you're pulling in the clutch, you're pulling tear-offs. You can literally change. And if guys can take their hands off the handlebars before hydraulic clutches and tighten the clutch with their hands, you could definitely have a little button there that is, when they're in the air, hey, time check, and then let go for communication.
Yeah, I think Volan's validated your point right there.
What?
The fact he's got his rear brake, to your point, a little button versus another lever on the, to your point,
and,
exactly.
Like, AC is there and he's testing stuff. Let's have him keep testing some of that stuff, because it's how it should be. And truthfully, as far as a consumer standpoint, that is the kind of shit that sells. Is like, do you want to know how much they could sell if you have Tomac? Literally, you have communication between him and his mechanic going, hey, I know you're telling me to go harder, but I cannot go harder. Jett is just fucking leaving me. And then how much they could use that as press for the next round. Here's a highlight of Tomac saying how much better Jett is or whatever. Like, that is the kind of stuff that, as a social media entrepreneur, like I'd love that stuff. That's the only reason why I've gotten into F1, is because I like hearing all the fucking shit that they talk about in the cars, you
Well,
know?
take it a step further. Take it a step further. What if you're a Tomac fan and you could buy access to that channel? Let's say it's $20 a weekend, and all that money, or 80% of that money, were to go to that team, privateers, Kevin Morant's, those types of guys, right? How cool would that be? Because now you could show your support, like who, and heck, you could buy 5 or 6 different. You can buy as many as you wanted to, right? You literally could just, I don't know how you would do it on your phone. Maybe you buy something and right, you've got that. You've got the communication for Tomac today on this app. You have communication to Sexton on this. You have Kevin Morant's on this one. You know, you have Jorgensen on this one. Well, what would be cool about it is then that's a revenue stream for the team. Let MX Sports take their percentage because they've got to coordinate it and all that. Now you have another revenue stream that could come to that team and for that rider. I just think that would be very cool. Or
Yeah.
take all the money that people are buying in for the factory riders and make that another money pot for the privateers in the same race.
Yeah, but you know that as a business, they would never do that. They're gonna if they're gonna monetize it, they're gonna monetize it and keep it for themselves, just straight up.
But I just, to your point, instead of it being just exclusive for social media and for the media crew, think about how cool that would be for the people who love to listen to what's going on. I think we can learn a lot. A lot of the young moto parents that are here. How do you communicate with your athlete? What would you convey? Because I say and see this all the time. It's amazing to me how many amateur parents don't film their riders, and yet when you go pro, they film the living daylights out of you, and they review films all the time. And yet amateur parents don't think that that's part of their MO. So if you were to hear certain things like Johnny, you came out to one of my camps at Western there, right? And we talked about, hey, I want you guys to go get warmed up for 15 minutes. And I do the same thing every time I do a performance camp. When they come in, I go, how many of you guys set your sag? And you were there. Not one of them set their sag. So then they're out there chasing suspension and setup, not having sag set. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, you're not at like a ground neutral.
Yeah. But then when you got up and you started talking about, and you gave your insight when we put the bike on the stands, you have those parents that have a lot of aha moments. I think just hearing what these teams communicate, can you imagine hearing Mitch Payton, hearing Troy Lee, hearing Coker, hearing Ramsey, team managers. I mean, these are the guys that
Or just what happened with Cooper Webb, just be like, hey, Webb, if you start hearing any rattling or if you start any sense of loss of power, just roll it and we're done. And
well, that's where JT Money was so good. He went and looked at the pit board. What'd they say? Stay off the clutch. See, that's the kind of stuff that would have been conveyed through, but because JT Money's got a racing background, he knew, all right, what is the mechanic communicating me? Exactly what we're speaking about. The hard part about it is it takes Coop all the way around the track to get that brief message. So he could have had that information instantaneously instead of 2 minutes later.
Yeah.
So, and then we're back to safety again.
With the turn to electric, I know we hate talking about it, but it's possibly, more than likely, it's happening. But that just gives more room for being able to hear with stuff. And I know some of the comments are talking about heads up displays. And I know in like cycling sunglasses, they have it, and swimming goggles, they have it, where you can see your pace, your speed, your stuff like that. That potentially I could maybe see it, where you get like live data of how fast you are to the next rider, whatever, with GPS. But I think first step is definitely the radio communication for these riders. And it's a money bag for me. Like, why not invest in it? Because it is a money bag for that stuff.
No, 100%. And it boils down to the safety. Unfortunately, we're talking about this literally as an armchair quarterback on Monday morning. And now we have a hurt Sexton. His ego's damaged. Once again, people are saying that he is succumbing to the pressure. Every time Jett gets on the gate, he happens to have these kind of mental lapses, silly mistakes. And this one was a big one, unfortunately.
That is so the irony in that You have
Mhm.
somebody that's rolling off of winning, and he doesn't have a giant scandal, which 3 years ago would have completely canceled Jett, where Honda would have dropped during the whole Black Lives Matter, and when everyone on social media was posting black squares and all that going down, would have completely just canceled Jett. Now
Yeah.
we're living in a little bit, a little bit more unfiltered type of a world. And honestly, moto is not the general demographic of people, and it's a pretty small sport. So, and nobody really wants to lose a superstar as big as Jett. So there's a lot of asterisks there. But you have Jett that's going through all that, and he's able to come out and just silence everybody and go 1-1. And then you have Sexton, who has none of that, besides not just getting the only real thing that's going on with Sexton is he's not getting paid by KTM. Or I can imagine it's pretty hard to get paid by KTM.
Yeah.
And he ends up having this happen. But again, with the radios, could you imagine if he communicated back like, no, I'm staying out there. Like, I think I could get a top 10, or whatever reasoning he had to stay out there. Because there was some reason that was going on in his head to why he thought he could stay out there.
But it reminds me, and I apologize, I'm not a Formula One guru, but I remember maybe it was on that Netflix special, but that young man, and they're like, he's leading the race, and he wanted to know if he had the fastest lap time, and they're like, it doesn't matter, just finish the race. And he's like, and he goes after and he gets the fastest lap time. And of course, that could have gone absolutely horrible, as we talked about in our last show together, when that young man first race goes out and he kept pushing the envelope, and then he wraps that car up into the wall. And then when the race came, I think he got 5th. But it's that idea, if you listen to that banter back and forth, and I say to Mikhail all the time, it's amazing how calm, cool, and collected they are going as fast as they are. And they're just talking like you and I are talking. And I'm like, how in the heck do you do that? Your heart rate's at 190. They sound so nonchalant. There's a gazillion horsepower underneath you. And you're just like, they're like, doo. They're just driving the minivan around to the 7-Eleven.
The G's that are going on in there.
Oh, geez.
Still talking.
Yeah,
Coach, I know, like I said, I told I was going to take my little girl to breakfast since it's her birthday here. And I know we're having a good conversation here, but moving to the 250s for just a bit, what happened to Jeremy Martin finishing 21st overall on a factory?
I don't think anything's wrong. It's just, he's a couple of races removed from it. He hasn't been focusing on race intensity. I mean, you think about it, just a couple months ago during Supercross, he was, hey, if you wanted to pay and come tour the Star Yamaha pit, live with the pros for a day, and he still kept riding and he looked good. And Bobby's like, hey, let's go racing. I don't think there's anything to worry about with him. I am glad that he's going to get the whole season. So instead of it only being a three race deal, he's going to race the whole season. He'll get better. And we talked a little bit about this, when you look at the depth of the 450 field, and to think that Jett just literally walked away from everybody, including Tomac. Yes, it's one of Jett's favorite tracks. We understand that. But look at the number of 450 champions that are out there. I know we say it, we all joke about it. The deepest 450 outdoor gate that I think we've seen in quite a while. Look at the 250 gate. Holy cow. And so all we've got to do is take a look at Seth Hammaker, very good in Supercross. And then he's in that, just 5 to 8 range, not just saying that in a negative way. It just shows you when people are back. We don't have Pierce Brown. I think that would be another one. But look at Mosiman sneaking in there in 9th. I was very impressed with Garrett Marchbanks, top Cowie guy. He kind of surprised me on the Team Green side of things. And then the consistency of Shimoda going 2-2. I think that's a huge statement that he's looking for a job to go somewhere else. Those were very big surprises.
Some of the live chat here have been talking about that Joe wants out of Honda. And I know we kind of talked a little bit. You think whatever the hunters are bringing in with the negative press is affecting Joe?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying. I mean, he wasn't allowed to train down at the dog pound. That seemed a little bit awkward. It just seems like the dominoes are following the wrong direction.
Why wasn't he allowed to train at the...
I don't know. I haven't spoken to the Lawrences about it. I have no idea. I know Hymus was there. And so for whatever reason, and again, this is where we get into this sticky, nasty behind the scenes kind of
So sorry for just context.
No, sure.
Factory Honda, you have 3/4 of the team training together, and they're excluding one person.
But you have to remember, it's not Honda's responsibility because the Lawrence brothers own that facility. It's not a Honda facility. So, they like
I know, but like
Colin
brother in
Park.
arms, you're on the same team,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of sticky nastiness. Who's saying what? Who's working with who? Who's not working with who?
Oh, isn't he still working with Lucas?
Yes.
So
him and Vial both are still
it's
represented.
almost like guilty by association. So you can't ride with us because you're still working with the agent, and we don't want the agent to find any, I don't know, anything that we're doing to use against us more since we're suing him.
Well,
That's
but
probably it.
here's where it gets sticky, and I don't know the specificity of timelines. Before the whole Lucas Mirtl thing broke, Joe was not riding there. So I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Is it that Hymas didn't want him to be there? I don't know. I don't want to start hearsay here. Just when you look at the timelines, Joe was not training at Compound before the whole lawsuit thing went out, and it's only gotten worse since then.
So. Okay, so it was bigger before then.
Huh. And then again, the why. Like Colin Park was riding there, but Joe Shimoda couldn't ride there. So when you look at those kinds of things, Dean Wilson was able to ride there when he got the Honda ride, but Joe couldn't ride there. Now, again, I'm all for it. It's just like when somebody says something that I don't agree with, I don't think they should be shut down. Just because, they don't let Joe ride there doesn't make the Lawrence brothers bad people. They have their reasons why they didn't want somebody.
You're not going to gel with all your teammates.
Well, go ahead. Excuse me.
Well, I just was gonna. I'm interrupting you, and I apologize.
No, you're good.
The Star Yamaha thing. I think a lot of guys like Jordan Smith wanted to get the F out of Dodge to get away from Deegan.
So did Levi
Kitchen. And then I think Sexton wanted to get the F away from Honda to get away from the Lawrences.
100%.
So like it
100%.
happens.
Yeah, I mean it's not a new environment. The difference though is the Lawrence brothers own their own facility. Star Yamaha owns the goat farm. So that to me is where it's a little bit different. The Lawrence brothers, I'm all about capitalism and free choice. And I may not agree with what you say, but I don't want to censor you. But just because you may not agree with what I say, I shouldn't be censored either. Those guys have the right and the privilege to let whoever rides there ride there. It's just, that's what I'm saying. It's so ugly. It's so sticky behind the scenes. It just, maybe it's ironic and bad timing, that Joe stayed with Lucas, Vial stayed with Lucas. The boys didn't. They've got their situation going on legally. Who knows?
I know.
It is interesting to see the fact that Hymas was actually leading that first moto. What was he, 3 seconds up when he went down? That showed quite a bit for Hymas. I'm still impressed with Joe the most on the Honda team. I think
Coach,
he's looking for a job. I hear he's at PC now, but at any rate.
Sorry, just as far as mannerisms going, does this look weird to you?
No, no. If you know Lucas at all, he's very shy. And it's funny because as an agent, when you see him in front of the cameras, like when that famous picture of him in between Hunter and Jett, that's his wheelhouse. That's what he's familiar with. He is not comfortable. Like I've asked him in 100% transparency, I've asked him to come on, meet my guest. And he's like, I don't do podcasts. He's not comfortable doing podcasts. He doesn't like to be in front of the camera. Absolutely hates it. He's a very nervous person in front. And it's sad to me that people are like, oh, he's on a meth trip. He's on drugs. No, he is not comfortable in front of a camera.
Okay, well, just when somebody's doing this,
he's very uncomfortable in front of the camera.
Protection, right?
Yeah.
When somebody's expressing themselves, I'm the biggest guy in the room type stuff. When you're doing this, you're trying to. It's the fetal position, it's protect yourself, and so I thought that was.
No, like for example, when I've invited him to come on to my Meet the Guest Next Chapter. He said, can we do it without it being a Zoom call? That's how uncomfortable he is being in front of a camera. So that's why he called into.
And behind closed doors, he's making these $1 million deals with people. But I
guess
guess
that's his wheelhouse. That's his wheelhouse. That's what he's good at. And it's like, look at Robin Williams, right? When he's on stage or when he's performing, if you've ever seen any seen any documentaries with Robin Williams, he's scathingly insecure. There's that one video where he comes out of a side door. And there were some people across the street and they're like, Robin. And he was just cowered down like a beaten dog. So I really, my heart breaks for Lucas because people are character assassinating him saying he's on drugs and strung out.
Dude, it's the internet. It's the internet. Like when
Yeah,
I was
but fuck
posting
these guys.
videos about the whole Deegan and Cole Davies things, people were taking different context of what actually was going on, and
Yeah.
just blowing me. It honestly, it's funny where things go with the demographic of people, because like for me, sorry, Coach, YouTube and Instagram are fairly positive.
Hmm.
Okay, Facebook and TikTok are just fucking people just ripping everyone new ones and just saying the dirtiest things, you know.
Yeah, but
So
look at the average age of TikTok. That's what you get. It's just a
yeah, but
bunch of
then what's
immature.
Facebook? You know, like that's
Well, Facebook, unfortunately, everybody's brave behind a keyboard, and I still think there's a lot of fictitious accounts that are out there just for that reason. I mean, there's people that like to stir the stink pot. I'll get people that will. Whenever somebody leaves me a comment on any of my videos, first thing I do is I click to see, are they even legit? Account
well,
created in 2020 and 0 subscribers. I'm like, yeah, this is just somebody that wants to just
eh,
be mean.
take
Just an FYI, Johnny, hold your thought right there. Just keep in mind, like when Lucas calls in and he does, a podcast or he does an interview, notice it's on, his face is not on there because he can at least be comfortable on the phone, but he's
mhm.
still nervous. Because you think about it, when he goes into a negotiation, he's good at what he does, and that's where he excels. When you're calling into a show and you're not sure where the questions are going to go, especially if they want to try to paint you out to be a villain or they want you to try to defend yourself. Not that he's afraid to defend himself, but there's not a lot of things he can say because of limitations. And I'm not defending any situation. I'm not privy to that at all. So I want to make sure I'll leave it with that. I'm not trying to justify anybody's behavior or
Well,
accusations
I'm
that
just
have or
having a
haven't
little
been
bit
said.
more context of why
Yeah.
Joe is talking about getting out of Honda, right? Or at
Yeah.
least the rumors are him leaving
Hmm.
Honda. Like
Yeah.
why? Because he's doing really well there.
Well, all of
Um,
a sudden, because his supercross wasn't on fire.
Well, he to be honest, his Supercross was on fire. He won what, round 2 or something, and then he broke
But
his hand, and that kind of
but
derailed his whole
you know
season.
what? I sincerely apologize. I forgot about the hand. That I sincerely apologize. That was a dickhead comment. You're right.
No, no, no. It's
The
not
thing
dickhead
that
comment. It's
no,
just
no, no. I
there's
totally
too many
forgot about it.
races, Coach. It's hard to remember what went on with everyone.
I think the part that impressed me the most with Joe is historically, we always say he's the guy that comes on late season. And for him to be at round 1 and be that aggressive, I think is a great sign. Now, you could chalk it up to the idea that his contract's up at the end of the year, wants to get out of Honda. I hear he's got another offer to go back to PC, which is cool. I'd
Dude,
love to see
PC
him
would
go
be
back.
so lucky to have him
Yeah.
because they've just been. I mean, they've got a good set of crew right now, but it's kind of falling apart on them. And
Think
Hymus,
about think
I
about
was
how cool Mitch Payton is to think that he's actually allowed Marchbanks to come back. That breakup was not very good, and he went back. And then they're going to bring Joe back. How cool is Mitch? If you've never met him, I've never met him and spent a lot of time with him.
I've just passed by with him. I haven't said
Yeah,
we haven't like shared paragraphs with each other or anything.
yeah.
But
But think about his loyalty. Think about when, gosh, I'm drawing a mental blank. Brock Tickle. Remember when he was offered a 450 ride? So Mitch put the 450 on the back of it. They were under the pits together.
I believe that was it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said earlier, Levi was right there with, and then going back to speaking of the Levi situation, think about, that's why I was saying, Johnny, if you've got the results, look at the top 10 in the 250 class and look at the bottom 10 in the 250 or the last 10 in the bottom 40, right? Look at the names that are in there. You got Forkner in there. Styles, unfortunately, that's more of his wrist
Why
issue.
isn't it showing me? Oh,
I'm sorry. Go to Racer X. Go to Racer X, and then at the very top, click on 250 full results. So go to Racer X's homepage. No, go to Racer X online.
yeah, I know, Coach. Sorry, we're live here, so
Well, if you go to Racer X online, and at the very top it says full results, and that's where you'll see who got what positions. It's so easy. But if you look at like Forkner's down in there, Thrasher's down in there, it was just a lot of people banged up. If you go all the way to the bottom, look at the bottom 10. Like I say, Styles Robertson's doesn't count because his wrist is still pretty jacked up. But look at those names. And that's what's crazy. You look at the top 10, and it was like everybody you expected. And as we teased a little bit earlier, every year they say, oh, it's the deepest field ever. But my goodness, starting the outdoors in 2025, that 450 class, I mean, the 25th place guy, you know, you got Colt
I
Nichols.
wish we had Kenny out there. I wish Kenny was back out there too.
I just think, and this is strictly my opinion. I have no grounds to go off of, but anybody who's dealing with fatigue related issues, Marchbanks, Seth Hammaker, Ken Roxon, those are the ones that are public about being fatigued. Ryder D, those guys. It's going to be a long summer for them. The only thing that, I was going to say, you know, Tomac not racing Supercross, Jett not racing Supercross. I see them being very consistent because, pardon me, no disrespect to Plessinger, but he's already got 93 races under his belt. You know what I mean? So as we get into the second, I mean, we're only into the tail end of May. We're not even into the month of June yet. And look at how much racing these guys have done. So the guys that were able to sit out Supercross, and I know that they're not happy about it. I mean, if you start adding up bonuses, right? Think about the opportunity cost for Jett. $100,000 a weekend, $1.5 to $2 million bonus. So it's not like even though he's fresh as a daisy, I guarantee if we had Jett on the show, he'd say he'd much rather go racing because they're competitors and the money is nice. But I'm just looking at it from an opportunity cost. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens when we get to the middle part of the outdoor season. I think the fatigue of the early, the first 4 months of the year are going to really rear its ugly head pretty quick. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts going on, not only with the race results, but the depth of the talent and then the consistency. Johnny, this is something else. Look at the results. Look at the top 10 and look at the inconsistencies. You have a guy that'll go 9-17. You have a guy that goes 7-11. It's just really all over, except for the top three guys.
Yeah, 7-15, 9-14.
Look at
Ryder
the gap
D,
on those.
17-9.
And that just shows you, how
Levi Kitchen, 10-38.
10-38. And those are the kinds of things where you're just like,
but Jeremy Martin, I know he fell, but a 2020.
But that's good for him. No, that's good for him. Out of 42 guys, for him to go 2020 in his first race back, I think that's a great starting point. And it shows the consistency. I'd be curious, Johnny, if you looked at his lap times, how consistent they were. But yeah, the inconsistency just shows you the depth of the field. Same thing with the 450s, with the exception of Jett and with Hunter, Hunter, Jett, and Eli, they were the most consistent on 450s. But then when you get down into the 8 through 15, it is all over the board. Did you ever figure out what happened to Malcolm? Obviously he went down. I don't know. Because they just showed him. James picked on him. He's like, oh.
Bike and
yeah, James is like, he's pointing the wrong direction. I love James's little one-liners on his brother.
He did a really good job. I really like having because he was pointing out stuff with the tires and the suspension. Like that was all really good commentating for sure. But Coach,
yeah, he's good.
I don't mean to cut us short.
No, go get that birthday girl.
Breakfast reservations for my little girl that's just turned 4 today.
Congrats.
And yeah, so everyone make sure you check out Coach Rob on his YouTube channel. He has his podcast. He does 2 episodes every month with Meet the Guest and the Vet Show, and you've got the also
amateur motocross.
Yeah, amateur motocross. Yep. And then this week I'm going to be breaking down some of the bike differences between some of the guys and some of the different lines, and we'll have a good time. So hit up that chat, hit the subscribe button, and enjoy your Memorial Day. Till next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Keep it WFO.